I think oftentimes something that'll get someone to sell is if you say, hey, why don't you let us pay you a fixed price for, say, 5 or 10 years use. At the end of that time period, we do a balloon payment if we want to keep it. And if we go out of business, you get it back. Right. So I generally find that that's an easier structure than a lease agreement. So like, hey, we'll pay you $50,000 to use this thing. And if you think this is going to be worth $5 million in 100 years, like, cool.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Patrick, appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Your company sold. I literally screamed at my lawyer one day. I was doing a real estate deal, and he said I had to notarize some paper. San Francisco down, I think it was on Valencia. I found a notary, like the shadiest. I mean, it was this convenience store, and it had like, we'll notarize for whatever they charge me, because he said I absolutely. And I thought, like, this is the like this problem should be solved. And he said, no, you legally have to do it.
Legally, yes.
You figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, it largely hadn't changed. If you think about living in a really small town of like 50 people, and there was Fred, and everyone trusted Fred, the current, the system made sense that you would go and sign in front of him. But in today's world, it certainly was outdated.
What changed? I mean, was there some laws? I think I saw 2018, something happened where you're like, but you started this in 2016?
2016. So I had a similar experience as you. I had a notary, transaction that went awry. So when I sold my last company, I actually had a Twitter. I had to get a document notarized, went in, got it done, sent it off, and it turns out there was an error. And so this whole drama and whatnot. And so that's what sort of got me digging. And I found in Virginia, actually, they had passed a law in 2012 that allowed for the presence in a notarization to be established by video call.
Okay.
There's a bunch of other stuff. So that was the initial cool. You can do this by sort of like telemedicine, but for notaries. And then of course the question was, could you do a national service? And that was a whole other set of work.
And then in the early days, you had 3 big clients that came on, which is not normal, I guess, in the early days of a startup. Like you had the biggest home builder. Yep. Like, how did you get those clients? Like,
yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. So I did not appreciate the impact of the company when I started it, just to be clear. So
okay, because I feel like it was a ambitious early, and then boom, 3 of the if I think of the use cases, it sound like you nailed them right out of the gate.
I mean, we're still figuring stuff out. But,
okay, please tell me. Yeah, there's some.
Yeah, I mean, so
you're human.
I'm coming up on 5 years doing this,
yeah.
Which is wild to think about. I started it. I had a newborn. I'm about to have my 3rd kid, so it's been a chunk of time.
Yeah.
And the gist is, I started it because I wanted to solve my own problem, which was that just like you, I didn't want to have to go, disrupt my life and go see a notary again. And it was a fun project. It was cool technology, solved interesting problems. So that was sort of my initial. Someone's going to do this. It might as well be me.
Yeah.
Launched the product in February of 2016, and immediately, the people who called us was just wild. So huge auto insurance companies, mortgage lenders, title companies. If you name a bank or private wealth firm, they came inbound, and we were still this tiny little company of 3. And it was the same thing almost every time, which is if you think it sucks to get something notarized, imagine managing that 100,000 times a year or 1 million times a year, and having sort of your business
depend on that.
So we sort of heard the same thing over and over and over again. And then we sort of ran into a brick wall of cool concept, but could people actually accept it? And if you think about it, like, Uber, when they started as a company, you could get in whatever car you want and take it to the airport. Imagine you showed up and United Airlines was like, no, that doesn't count, go home.
So even though it was legal and you did it.
Yeah, these companies would get it and they'd say, what the hell is this? It doesn't have a raised stamp. How do you do it online? Basically what the hell? And so almost at the same time, the National Association of Secretaries of State, which is notaries report up into the state Secretary of State, so it's their association, came out and they launched a task force that they were going to look into this. So we launched the product in February. I think they announced that in March.
Wow. And
they had this June meeting. And so my co-founder and I said, look, we're going to go travel the country.
Lobby.
So we went and met all these secretaries. And, it's been a 2.5, 3 year process. So they're now on board. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac's on board, these others. everybody.
Was there a risk that it wouldn't be legally allowed?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot of money into the company before we got on the other side of that hump, and so that was our bet that we would.
Yeah, the notarize.com, assuming, is not cheap.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this.
So there was a bet. There was
Yeah.
like, hey, we think it's going to go there, but there's some work to be done.
Yeah.
On the market.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and so I think I've been to 40 some states as a company. We've testified, I think, in 40 state legislatures. We've changed 22 state laws. We've had to build the product and prove the model, and then go, convince the market. I think in terms of the customers, so Lennar, country's largest home builder, is an investor and customer. Realogy, largest real estate company, they're an investor and customer. And then we've got, 2 top 10 lenders and a bunch of others. And I think, for them, most of them came to us inbound. And, what they really all said was similarly, it sucks to manage this process. But really, they've had multi-efforts to digitize their entire company and the way they serve their clients. And the notarization is what's forced them to paper. And so they've seen us as really being that key to solve that problem for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been rolled into this digital transformation movement that's sort of happening in every sector.
And how do people in the space of like signature signage, like, was there a worry that they might add this to their product, or how do you compete? How do you position?
Yeah.
Has that happened?
There's no one doing it yet. We've partnered with some of them.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yep. And, the gist is most of those companies are pure software businesses, right? And for us, we run a service. And so we have the software, and then we also staff the notaries. And some of them are part-time, some of them are full-time. And so if you're a consumer or if you're a business, we've got 24/7 coverage, average connection time in less than 30 seconds. And it's a different skill set.
Different business model.
Yeah, different business model. We've had I'll say struggles and now success trying to figure out how to make it look like SaaS when it's a transactional business. And then, the compliance work, all these things, we now have a system that understands in these states, you got to do this, you got to do something else elsewhere. And it's been super complicated. So someone that wants to enter the market's going to have to go do all that same.
It's kind of like the, I know in a lot of the marketplace businesses, there's the identity providers, the ones that verify identity. Airbnbs, they all have to.
Yep.
Yeah. So you guys can play and provide a critical component for a lot of these other companies without, they just may not want to enter that, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. And then how do you guys think about like product strategy and roadmap, and like what's the evolution of Notarize?
Yeah, we just had our offsite yesterday, so it's good.
Oh, cool. So
good
this is all top of mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as a company, one of our challenges, we've had to race to the enterprise much faster, than a company normally would.
Well, I feel like that was like day one.
It was day one. And then, furthermore, for us to serve our customers, there are other organizations that approve.
Yeah.
And so for us to serve a title company, the insurance underwriter has a say in it. For us to serve a lender, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and others in the secondary market have a say in it. And you have to be an approved vendor and go through this process. So before we had actually won a single customer, we went through a SOC 2 audit. We did all this sort of enterprise work.
This is crazy for
It's
a
crazy.
startup.
Yeah. And so, the prize has got to be big enough to justify doing that.
Yeah.
But we did. And so what's then interesting is we've sort of worked back then and gone out and, focused on winning and serving the market and, making money. But so our product roadmap has, sort of vacillated from prove the thing works.
Yep.
Right? Prove that you can serve the enterprise, to now trying to do much more customer-driven development and, talking to our customers. And what we find today, the single biggest challenge we have is people just don't understand how it works. And so you're a small business lender, you're a, contractor, you name it, you come to our site. You've never heard of us, right? So most of the time people search for I need a notary and they come across our site and suddenly it's like video-based
Notarization.
So like, what the hell is that? That's sort of the first challenge to get over.
Didn't even know this was a thing.
Yeah, and then we've invented all these terms and concepts for, in the real estate industry, we call them, we say place an order, right? And it turns out we call our customers and they don't know what that means, right? And so we're really now focused on, just usability, frankly, and making it dead simple for people to sign up, understand the concept, try, buy, commit.
Is there a custom workflow? Do you see a custom workflow per industry based on the lexicon so that for them it makes sense? Like real estate's going to have a certain flow that
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we've done a really good job, and we've been intentional over the history of the company. We've got one, core product, and then based on sort of the customer, the geography, it morphs to serve that transaction.
Okay.
So a real estate transaction, different tools. We call them meetings. You connect in a video meeting. Different tools present themselves to both the signer and the notary. There's different compliance
Based on the use
requirements
case.
Based on the use case, and then based on the customer. So we do now allow customers to configure. They can pass instructions to the notary for what they need accomplished during that session. And so we now have some customers that we're actually not performing notarizations. They're just these real, high value, complicated transactions.
Should verify identity?
Yeah. We verify identity and then make sure people complete the transaction properly.
Interesting. So it's a different use case using the same infrastructure. You guys have raised total 43 million.
I think it's 43.
Yeah, 43 point something. That's what or Crunchbase or whatever says.
Yeah.
What have you spent the money on?
I mean,
because first round was 8, or maybe there was a seed before the A. A was 8.
Yeah,
or something.
2.5, 8 took us to 11,
Yeah.
and then the rest is
Yeah.
in a B. So we've got more than $10 million in sort of lobbying and opening the market.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we've got several $1 million into our own legal research and compliance work. And then it's been a lot of educating the market. So for us, we've put a lot of effort into marketing, but that's not necessarily customer acquisition focused. It's more the educational materials. How does it work? Is it effective? Where can you use it? Video training series, things of that nature. And then product development. I mean, we've had a team of more than 40, writing software
Engineers.
for,
Has the product shifted from the first solution to like today? Was there anything core that some assumptions that you made that were just not, or was it for the most part the way it works is how it's worked?
It's a great question. I haven't thought about that. I think for us, a decision we struggle with today is how much do we care about our business users? So ultimately, the person we interact with is largely the signer.
Yeah.
So the borrower, the person buying a home. But our customer is the business. So how much do we care about them using our product versus integrating into the tools that they already use? And I think we're learning it's segment or industry specific. In the real estate market, we've recently partnered with Resware. And so they're the largest software system for title agents. We can just be a button that they click, right? That's great to get volume up, but we feel in other instances we can provide a richer experience in our core product.
It creates more enterprise value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even we let people join the video session. So if you're a title agent and you want to connect, with the notary and your customer, you can do so. So they need to be in our product experience to do that. And I think that's something we're constantly grappling with is how to get the distribution from partnering with folks, make it easier to train, their teams and whatnot, but then also provide an amazing product experience.
Was there ever a time where a marketplace solution to this was kind of like an idea? Like instead of having the notaries work for you, I'm assuming that.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
And so we've already shared with the market that we're going to do that, both independent notaries and then our customers themselves, and be more of a platform as a service model. The challenge there is that there's a lot of compliance work that's required. People connect, you have to validate their identity. You try on web, you flip to mobile. There's just complexity in that, and we know how to do it.
I build a marketplace. It's tough.
It's tough.
I wouldn't, in hindsight, like I'll never do it again. It's like having twins. It's like
yeah.
But
some of our customers, though, it's their delivery model that they require.
Yeah.
So
it makes sense.
So it makes sense, and we'll do it. But we want to be sure that the product is nailed before we open it up.
Yeah. Spindle.com.
Yeah.
Acquired by Twitter.
Yeah.
Notarize.com. Where are you getting these domains?
I love.
Do you have any other? Did you?
I definitely have other domains.
Yeah. Any other? Just one other that you're willing to share? Just like.
I don't know about that. No.
Yeah. No? Keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
How long have you been been fascinated with domains?
Oh, I've loved domains for a long period of time. I mean, I bought a bunch of domains in college, which then I let expire. In hindsight, I shouldn't have done that. I could have bought my last name.com, and I ended up with the .org because I just didn't pull the trigger. And so I love domains. Interestingly, I've got a different take on sort of the strategy, which I've shared before, and I think number one issue trying to buy domains is that the seller's not serious, or they're not don't have realistic price expectations. So I just try to suss that out really quickly. And so, Spindle ultimately, if you go online, there's people who have massive domain catalogs.
Yeah.
I reached out. I said, look, I've raised $2.5 million. This is the product concept.
You told them right out.
Yeah. I said this.
Usually I hide that stuff.
Well, yeah, exactly. People normally don't.
Oh, because they want to know that you're a real buyer.
Exactly. And I want to know if they're a real seller. Frankly.
That's a good,
And so I said, this is the general concept. I said, we take, unstructured data, we, put it through a system that structures it, and then we provide a search experience and ultimately timelines, right? And so I explained the general, concept that we were focused on. I said, is there anything in your portfolio that you think might fit the bill? And I got responses. I think I reached out to 5 of these people. I got responses from all 5 with proposals and prices. And then they all agreed, and they were reasonable. I think I paid 40 or 45 for Spindle. And then for Notarize,
which is great for a one-word domain.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I tried to buy Mix.com. I tried to buy a bunch of others, and they all wanted $1 million.
Yeah.
And Garrett Camp has since bought a lot of these domains, so I wonder what he's paying. I respect his domain game.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, he might be the best. And then for Notarize, similarly, I reached out. It was actually a private equity firm that owned it. They bought some huge portfolio, and they were a motivated seller, and I think I got that one for 42.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking 6 figures.
Now the crazy thing about Notarize is actually I get the domain, I got the Twitter account through a connection, and then I go to the App Store, and it was totally unclaimed. Just registered it.
Just open and ready to go.
Yeah. So it goes to show people weren't thinking about online notarization.
That's cool. So do you do that up front? What else do you? Because I mean, sometimes it's just you got to get lucky. You got to.
Oh, you got to put.
Yeah,
I spend
it's
tons and tons. I still do it today. I'm on the internet and I'm looking at
the
stuff
art of just searching for the deal.
Yeah, and then you can find generally speaking, if someone owns a domain and they're not sophisticated enough to hide their identity, they're probably someone that would take an offer.
Yeah.
You just.
Have you ever seen people negotiate? I think Dropbox did this when they get Dropbox, and that guy I heard was running affiliate offers to their competitors on the .com. So he's like, I really need to. So either equity or leasing or what are creative ways that you've heard or you've done to acquire a domain without a large cash output?
Yeah. So other companies I've been associated with. So you can do a lease agreement that. I'm generally
essentially
lease to own. I'm generally not a fan of those. I think oftentimes something that'll get someone to sell is if you say, hey, why don't you let us pay you a fixed price for say 5 or 10 years use. At the end of that time period, we do a balloon payment if we want to keep it, and if we go out of business, you get it back, right? So I generally find that that's an easier structure than a lease agreement. So hey, we'll pay you $50,000 to use this thing, and if you think this is going to be worth $5 million in 100 years, cool,
So that way they're not losing the asset.
Yeah, and I think that generally gets the conversation started, and then it leads to a sale, right? It gets someone sort of to think about.
Gets them in that they're in market now, and then it's okay, let's talk terms.
Exactly. And
that's
it's
a creative way to do it.
They'd want $200,000 in 5 years. It's what would you take?
So you essentially get them to agree to their price indirectly as a proxy by the terms, and then you can kind of bring them back down to let's just do that today. You mentioned that you did your offsite just yesterday or whatever. How do you run? Because a lot of founders that watch this are, at that scale where they're trying to figure out how do they build the business that builds the business.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on? Because I know you sit on a few boards. The cadence, the meeting rhythms, the responsibility of the CEO to communicate. How do you do that at Notarize?
I'm still figuring it out. We've brought in some great leadership this year, which has been impactful. So we had a woman join, Liz Graham, as COO. So she's out of Wayfair and HubSpot and Comcast and other companies. She knows what she's doing. She's been helpful. I think she's predominantly setting the cadence for the business these days.
What did she do when she came in?
She came in January, maybe late January, and just immediately hey, we're going to have a staff meeting or leads meeting every week, and then she actually shows up. So what a concept.
Crazy idea.
Right? But for me, between fundraising or customer
I may be
development,
there, may not be.
Yeah, and I think, that we're going to publish an agenda before the meeting, and we're going to walk through it, and it seems obvious, but it takes real discipline to do those things and to think about sort of the meeting structure and cadence of the company. And so for me, I for a pretty big chunk of time tried to change myself, and then sort of came to realization that
know thyself,
which, I'm still working on. And so I've tried to then focus on what I think I'm good at, which is more sort of the forward-looking product development, engaging with some of our key partners. And then so it's evolving, right? And I think we've got certain parts of the company that are doing a much better job than others. But
So were you doing offsites before?
We were.
Okay.
I also, prior to her joining, I went down the OKRs path.
Yeah.
Right. And I've heard this from a lot of, founders, that you start to build a team, you read some books, OKRs, yay. And then you start out and you don't want to give up control, so you're very prescriptive. So initially OKRs was me just trying to
Task
find a way
management
to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And then we flipped, and then it became me much more focused on the goal, let the team set the KPIs, but then really
negotiate it a little bit.
Yeah, but it didn't really work either because there wasn't necessarily the team didn't feel like it was their own. Yeah. And so we've gotten rid of that. And now what we've really focused, at least in the product org, is on trying to identify problems to solve. We've got the team organized lines of business, so sort of
general. You have consumer and you have B2B?
We've got consumer, we've got B2B, and then we've got real estate.
Okay.
Real estate's a unique beast.
Yeah.
And so we've really tried to say we can't have more than 3. We're going to try to pick 3 problems for a quarter, that have the most impact, get buy-in on those, and let the team have more ownership over the projects that might
solve those problems.
Solve the problems. So we're trying to figure it out.
That's cool. And then in regards to kind of like KPIs in the early days versus now, is there anything unique that you guys have done or?
Well, the initial KPI was simply, could we do this?
Okay.
And there was a very real chance up until 18 months ago that after all the investment and all the product work, that the answer was going to be no. So we're on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I think for us these days, what we're focused on is really activation. So we have tons and tons of customers. It's very difficult, to deploy. And I think something that we didn't fully appreciate, it's not that the software is difficult, it's a total change in business practice for our customers.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're a real estate company and you typically have had people coming into the office to perform closings, and now you're suddenly sending them out, we've got to get over these humps where people trust the process.
Cultural norms too. Yeah.
All these things. And so we got,
because they don't get paid if they don't close the deal. And that's
no one gets paid.
Yeah. So they're like, I know this way works.
Yes.
I don't know if I want to try this fancy digital thing.
Yes. And then in some segments are more, accepting of failure, frankly. So if, small business lender, if we can get 95% of people through, that's a massive win for them. It's huge efficiencies and better customer experience. And they've got these few, they're still going, the paper route. And real estate, loan has to close on a Thursday. The rates expire if you don't do it. So for us, we've gotten into some of these customers. They've started to roll it out. One goes bad, right? And what's interesting is that goes bad, we're finding isn't even necessarily a fixed concept. So we have instances where the person doesn't complete the meeting, we call it, and everyone gets all up in arms. And then we go and we watch the video, and really what happened is the customer said, hey, my doorbell rang. I kind of run downstairs and reconnect later. And we've built our product to support that, right? And so it didn't go bad. It just didn't complete on the first...
On that call.
Yeah. So, we've just really had to focus on, providing exceptional service. It's been a grind.
And how do you manage the time between venture partner and CEO?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, because I wasn't even sure if you were still doing the venture side, just because I can't imagine $40-some million in capital.
Yeah,
you got to build the business.
Yeah. No, I sat on the boards of 2 companies, Lob out in California and Drizzly here in Boston, and then I'm still a part of the investment committee at Polaris.
Got it.
I think what's interesting, and I certainly didn't appreciate, is being on a board, you don't control what happens, right? And so people talk about being an attorney and suddenly your client runs someone over and you're on Christmas vacation. Being on a board can be similar, where suddenly there's a deal or there's a drama of some sort. And I think that's the biggest challenge for me, is just not being able to control that timeline. But those companies are further along. They're both doing really well these days. So I love it. It's actually really great for me because I get to see things play out, and they're a little bit ahead of us. And so how they're dealing with either stock compensation or a key executive that's leaving, and I get to see that play out, and it helps.
Did you think you were gonna just do venture and just you couldn't get this idea out of your head? How did that come to be?
It's funny. Actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a venture capitalist, which is really weird.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
How did you even know what a venture capitalist was back then?
So I grew up in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And
yeah.
And my dad's best friend is John Hummer, so he's the founder of Hummer Winblad.
Yeah.
And then also in his classmates from school was Bob Cagle, Benchmark, Don Wood, Draper Fisher.
All right. Stacked.
So for me, I just saw my dad's friends who were cool guys.
Were venture capitalists.
Who were involved in fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then, I think the industry went through a phase where to be a VC, you had to have like a JD MBA.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was never going to happen for me.
Yeah.
And so I've for a very long time, I was like, that's dead.
Yeah.
Ambitions. Yeah. Deader than dead. And the industry's seen a shift where it's gone now back to people who, not entirely, but
operators or
product people there's there's a more diversity in terms of people's background or skill sets. So for me, I started my career at Microsoft, built some products there, went and started my last company, Polaris, backed that company. When we sold the business, I left. Polaris offered me the opportunity to join as an EIR. And so I thought I was going to start another company. I did a bunch of work, explored a bunch of ideas. It's a horrible construct, I think, to start a company just because you can.
Yeah.
And then found Lob out in California, and I said to the firm, hey, this is great. It's a great company. I think we should look at it. And they sort of said, well, why don't you look at it? And I was like, okay.
You were an EIR, and you're saying, hey, this is a cool company. And they're like, go double click on that and see what's there.
Yeah. And then
go lead the investment potentially.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, even it was just explore the company. And then that started some conversations. And so I joined as a venture partner, invested in Lob and then in Drizzly. And I thought I was like going to be that was my path.
You made it.
Yeah.
Dreams come true.
Dreams come true. Yeah. And then this just happened. So I, after joining the firm, Twitter went public. I got that document notarized. I had a bunch of drama. I then went skiing in Idaho with my family and broke my leg, and I spent 2.5 months on a couch and had a lot of free time. So I came back in March, and I said, hey, guys, I want to start a notary company, which that was an interesting conversation.
But is it because, what's interesting to me is like you're going to create. Even if you took Notarize away, like you're going to build. You're a creator. Was it because it was hard that it was like, I think this is the thing I should go work on? Like, because, it wasn't obvious in the early days. Like, I think a lot of founders that do YC and stuff, they don't realize how, like, not hard. Like, worst case for a lot of these founders, they're just going to go get a job making, $200,000 a year at Google. Like, there's not that much risk. But, like, you're going to go start something that, like, may never materialize. Is that why that idea was the one to follow more than something else? Or
no, that's a good question. So I having the experience as a VC, I spent a lot of time thinking about what made a good business,
mm-hmm.
right? And what would I want to pursue, either to invest in or to start.
Operate, yeah.
And I think ultimately, for me, they're the same decision, right? Which is, if it's not something that I would spend my time on personally because it's exciting enough or because I can't contribute in some way, like, why would I invest in?
Yeah.
Right? And my, Spindle, what was interesting, and my father-in-law, who's successful in technology, he told me this and I ignored him, was, we solved a very difficult technology problem, which is how to build a better, social search engine. Awesome. But then suddenly it was like, well, how do you productize it so someone could use it?
Yeah, what's the use case?
Yeah, and then how do you turn that into a business? And so we had to sort of still climb through all of those hurdles. And, we put 95% of the money into solving the technology problem and then had kind of no resources to go to market.
Yeah.
And at the time I was looking at, the Ubers and other products that came out, and those were not technology problems, right? That was a feature that they could validate very quickly, determine if there was demand, and they've since become complicated technology problems.
Yeah.
And so I was like, if I'm going to start a company, I want to play at that end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Where there's an idea that
real demand, the customers.
Well, you can validate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right. And so when this came along, it met that criteria. I'm like, people are either going to notarize documents on the internet or not. But my ambitions were much smaller. I thought I'll learn a lot. It's cool WebRTC technology, whatever. I'll get this thing built, and then I'll go try to sell it to someone and kind of continue on with my career. It wasn't until I started getting the phone calls from big enterprise customers saying that, holy shit, you've stumbled into this incredible opportunity, that I realized, that this was my shot.
That's interesting. And looking back, just with the amount of lobbying you've done, I mean, you really are like in the history books, you'll be written about.
Well, it's weird to think about.
I know, but it's interesting because like it's only after when it's actually written about that they can't not write about you because you were involved in that. Yeah,
I've said this to the team, which I don't know if it was motivating or not, which is that, we may fail, but we will be the company that has made it possible to buy your home on the internet.
Yeah.
And what's really crazy.
It's like in many ways, I look at Salesforce and like Benioff's marketing dollar enabled us all to build these SaaS companies. Because like people starting companies today don't realize like there was a day when enterprises did not put their data in. Like they were all on-prem, right? Yeah. And so like he had to convince a whole market. So you guys have created this whole like thing that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
Even if the business doesn't work, you've lobbied to make it happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I give companies like DocuSign and others a ton of credit because in their spaces they went through similar things.
Same, yeah.
If you watch, there's a video on YouTube, the founder of DocuSign talking about this and the 4 or 5 years and sort of the hell that he had to climb through to get to a similar place to where we are now. But it's funny in hindsight, like, Fannie Mae and the CFPB and others did a pilot and a study about digital mortgage before we even started this company. And what they found is the impediments to a digital real estate transaction was the legal acceptance and, lack of clarity for digital notarization and then getting things notarized. So had I been going like deep in that sector, I may have concluded that this was the thing to do. We just sort of lucked into it from the other direction.
Interesting. 3 kids now, 5 years?
I'm about to have
your third.
Yeah.
What have you learned about being, a father and an entrepreneur? So I've got 2, 6 and 7, and I'm always fascinated when I meet other folks doing both the family and the entrepreneurial thing.
Yeah, it's really hard. I'm sure you'd say the same. I've been very fortunate because I get to pick where the office is and whatnot. So I live in the city. Our office is about 3.5 blocks, and then my kids go to school 1 block from there.
Oh, triangulate.
So I try. Yeah, I mean the travel's the hardest part, and I think especially it's tough on my wife. We've got these. I've got 2 boys, 6 and 3 years old, and they're.
Did you change your sleep patterns at all?
I'm a horrible. I sleep probably 4 hours a night.
Okay,
it's terrible.
Yeah.
And so I try to get home every day 5:30. Sometimes 6. When I'm in town, put the kids to bed.
Night routine. Yeah.
And then I get back online, and then in the mornings I largely take them to school. But it's really tough. I think what the hardest part is then also my older son is very aware of when I'm gone, and it's you get questions from them and they're tough.
So tough. FaceTimes and they're like, "Where are you now? When are you going to be home?"
Yeah.
Yeah. At the beginning of a trip, and you're like, "Oh, I still got a few more days." Over the last few years, really your whole career, if you look back, who did you need to become as an entrepreneur to be the person that continues to lead this forward? What are the mindset beliefs that had to kind of shift?
That's a good question.
So I like to ask it.
Yeah. I'm still struggling with becoming more disciplined. And I think I've learned that the way that I run my own life is not conducive to a really healthy, well-functioning organization. And I'm someone who, Liz in her first week on the job, she told me, you're pressure prompted. So I'm the person who...
Pressure prompted?
Pressure prompted.
Never heard that.
Yeah. So I'm the person who has a big presentation I've got to give or whatnot. And the night before...
That's when it gets done.
That's when it gets done. But when you have an offsite and the team needs to be aware of what's happening and you got to get
prepare.
the agenda out 2 weeks in advance and whatnot, So that's been the biggest... I think that's the high-level statement for me. And then there's a lot of, sort of sub points underneath that I'm still working on. I think, I think what I've been good at is maintaining a long-term sort of vision and set of goals. Like, I'm the keeper of what we're trying to accomplish for the company, and it's very clear for us what we need to go do. Sometimes I can get ahead of where we should be. We now have this great opportunity because we've digitized either the real estate transaction or, in a different vertical, to do all this other cool stuff, right? But we still need to nail that. And so that's where
you kind of get.
Yeah, I like building stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's how do you set the sort of the organizational discipline and the KPIs to just make that great and earn the opportunity to do those
then unlock
things.
These other things.
Yeah.
And how did you learn to do that? Like, is it just trial and error? Are you an avid reader? Do you lean on your board?
I don't know that I figured it out. I mean, to be frank, I think for me, so I love everything about startups. I have my entire life. In addition to my dad's friends, or our neighbor was the first or second employee at Sun. I've got friends that have started successful companies. I love everything about it.
Yeah.
And so it's a constant topic of conversation for me. How are you building your team? What challenges are you solving? I tend to be pretty open myself, and I think that elicits more honest conversation with other people.
You go first. You're vulnerable about.
Yeah.
Here are my challenges.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to learn a lot. We have a great board. Dave Barrett at Polaris, who's the managing partner, is someone who's bet on me repeatedly, and who's been able to help draw in good folks. We've got this other gentleman, Jack Klink, who's got sort of the enterprise financial services experience. Larry D'Angelo logged me in on the go-to-market side. But it's really, I think, for me, what's made me realize that I need to change in some ways is what's the definition of insanity, right? So we've tried the same thing a number of times, and eventually, Michael Jackson, you got to look at the man in the mirror, right?
Yeah.
So
try something different.
Yeah.
Patrick, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Thanks for watching this episode of Escape Velocity. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment with your biggest insight from our conversation. Be sure to check out the next episode.